Oi, gente. Hoje eu tenho o prazer de entrevistar aqui no meu canal o grande Steve Turner, guitarrista da lendária banda Mudhoney. O Mudhoney está vindo ao Brasil, vai fazer shows em Curitiba, Rio, Belo Horizonte. No dia 21 de março, eles tocam no Cine Joia, em São Paulo. Você pode comprar seus ingressos aqui nesse QR Code aqui. Não marque bobeira, os ingressos estão indo muito rápido. Minha entrevista com o Steve foi super legal, a gente falou bastante do livro dele, o Mud Ride, a autobiografia dele, em que ele conta a história do grunge, a história do Mudhoney. Veja aí, foi muito bacana.
Man, how's it going? Good. Long time.
Good. Yeah. We're I think we're all super stoked to come down
Oh,
to Brazil and stuff. So yeah, it's
it'll
been a
be
while.
amazing. Let me
Yeah.
congratulate you on Mud Ride, man. I had a blast reading it. It's so
Oh, thanks.
informative. Great book.
Yeah, it was fun to do. Yeah.
And there's so much information there that I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know you almost played in Nirvana or you were invited to play.
Yeah, that's I've made a few mistakes in my life.
But one chapter that I thought was really curious was the one where you compared touring with Nirvana and Pearl Jam at the same time when they're both like really, really huge bands. And it's
Yeah.
amazing the difference in the mood of the camps there, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of shocking to all of us, I think, because you know, as much as I love the Pearl Jam guys, they were trying in our minds at that point, they were, trying to hit the big time and stuff, but
Yes.
they just had their stuff so organized and together that it really it changed my whole viewpoint completely.
But was it like a crash course in what can happen to a band when they get too famous too quickly?
Yeah, sure.
It
Yeah,
was.
like I think Nirvana was kind of shell shocked by it, I think. They made a very commercial record with
Yes.
Nevermind, obviously. Um, and that was all their choices and stuff. And I don't think anyone expected it to do what it did. But then it just seemed like they just kind of checked out in a way, and weren't taking care of business. And at that point they had to, it wasn't about punk rock credibility anymore. It was about, taking care of your stuff. And Nirvana didn't really do that at the time. And Pearl Jam was very organized and they had everything together and everybody was happy and excited. And I mean, they still have some of the same crew members to this day as
Amazing.
they did on that first trip. I mean, that says everything to me.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I mean, when you're in the middle of that shitstorm that was happening in the 90s, right? Of bands being signed, I mean,
Mhm.
contracts being signed to like crazy, like Butthole Surfers signing to Atlantic or whatever, it's probably very hard to get a grip on reality, isn't it?
Well, for us, we'd already been touring for a few years.
Yes.
And I suspect it was kind of the same with Butthole Surfers, where we'd been doing it for a while on our own and with Sub Pop's help, of course. And so when we signed to Reprise, we didn't ask for much and we didn't try to
Yes.
hold out for the biggest offer or any of that. We wanted
Hmm.
a small advance and we didn't want any tour support. We're like, we know how to tour.
Yeah.
We don't need a bus. We can do this on our own. So we kept it, small, um, as we like it small.
Yes.
And so we didn't go into massive debt or
Yeah.
there's no, it wasn't a nightmare for us being signed to Warner's. It worked and then it didn't work and we got out of there. And the times had changed. Uh, but yeah, some bands I think got royally screwed over. I
Yes.
mean, Tad's story is a story of, disaster after disaster. Um, and a
Eh,
lot of other bands I think had the same, if they did sign to a major, it didn't work out. But we were lucky with Reprise that there were still some old timers in the business that were there and uh, didn't expect a number one hit out of us right away. I mean, everything changed very
Yes.
quickly in the major label world in the 90s.
Hmm.
And in my mind, we stayed one record too long, but I don't think we wouldn't have been able to make Tomorrow Hit Today the way we did if we had left,
Okay.
but 'cause they made us spend money, whereas we hadn't really spent any money recording up until that point.
Okay.
or since.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of writing your book? I mean, did you have a lot of notes? Are you a very organized guy? Did you have like diaries or anything like that? Because there's a lot of information there, with first records and first shows. And was
Yeah.
it all from pretty much from memory, or did you have to do a lot of researching?
I did a little bit of fact checking. I wasn't a big diary guy or
Hmm.
journaler at the time. And I mean, it came about, it was right about the time the pandemic lockdown happened, and Adam Tepedalin contacted me with the idea. He had been a journalist in Seattle for
Hmm.
years. He was the editor of the Rocket magazine and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and also a huge grunge fan. He volunteered at Sub Pop in the early days, when he was a kid. Uh, and I thought about it for a little bit, and yeah, I wasn't really doing anything else. I was just
Yeah.
sitting at home with my two boys,
Yeah.
like, and I was like, okay, well, let's start talking. And so it was kind of done over Zoom meetings like this,
Hmm.
and just he would have, some topics to explore, and I would do my best to explore them with him, and
Hmm.
then go back and okay, there's a few mistakes in the book for
Yeah.
sure, but it was just kind of talking, and then I came upon kind of the idea for the format of the book where I wanted it split into three parts. You know,
Okay.
uh, everything that happened before January 1st, 1988, which is when Mudhoney
Yes.
formed. The second part's the glory years, if you will, and then after that,
Yeah.
basically after we got kicked off Warner's and Lucan quit, and we started having babies. And what do you do then? How do you continue being an artist
Yes.
in the face of real life, I guess, and um, so I liked that idea, like it being split into three parts, and we got to editing and that kind of thing. There's things I would do different. I mean, I've never written a book before
Yeah.
or a long format anything. I used to do some music journalism and stuff, but it's yeah, it was a learning process, and the whole thing was, and it was a great process.
And I think it's very curious that, I mean, so many people, they have a problem with the word grunge, right? A lot of bands don't want to be associated with it. They say, no, we're
Yeah.
not grunge, whatever. Grunge doesn't mean anything. But I mean, you put grunge in the subtitle of your book and you talk
Yeah.
about openly. I mean, was it always like that, or did you guys have some kind of problem with that word as when things were exploding in the 90s?
I think everybody bristles at being called something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be identified or simplified like that.
Yeah.
But in 1995, I basically had a personal epiphany. I was like, if we're not grunge, nobody is. Like
Yeah.
when we were doing
Of
My
course.
Brother the Cow, it's like we're as grungy as you can get, I think, so I was fine with the word after that. And I
Okay.
think it was part like a reaction to that the new school punk movement had happened, and
Yes.
Kurt had died, and you know the press was not being kind to us at that point.
Yes. Yes.
So I think I kind of dug in my heels a
Yeah.
little bit and said, fuck it, we're grunge. But I mean, we always saw ourselves as a punk band,
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
We all come out of uh, the hardcore and punk scenes. All of us, like
Yes.
Guy included in
Hmm.
that. Obviously, and but it was, to me, hardcore was kind of a dead end.
Yes.
And when Green River formed, it was like a lot of bands were going through the same problem. Like, where do you go from here?
Yeah.
You can't go any faster with
Yeah.
hardcore. Gang Green did it. ERI did it. You
Yeah.
can't go any faster. So, I mean, people proved me wrong on that, I think.
Yes. Still.
Sore throat, like things like that from the UK in the late
Yeah.
80s. But it seemed like all the hardcore bands were, and people from that scene were trying to figure out what to do next.
Yes.
And a big influence on Seattle was Black Flag, My War album.
Yeah.
The Melvins went from the tightest, fastest hardcore band to the slowest band in town. And,
Yes.
it seemed like weeks
Yeah.
to me. It was like, oh, okay. Um, side two, My War.
Because it was the album when Black Flag slowed
Yeah,
down and started doing longer songs, and I guess that was a huge thing for you guys, right?
yeah, it was a huge like. I mean, it was a controversial move for them at the
Yes.
time, but we loved it in Seattle. I think collectively, everybody was like, "Yeah, this is cool," and um, you had Malfunction doing
Yes.
kind of a sexy, slow blues thing. You had Soundgarden starting up. You had Feast. All these bands that were getting slower and groovier, but we all came out of the punk scene and across the country, and the world, but in the U.S. underground, like 1985, 86 is a really interesting time to me.
Yes.
You had Sonic Youth, you had Big Black, Butthole Surfers just being the greatest,
Yeah.
craziest thing in the world.
Meat
It was
puppets,
an
meat
amazing
puppets.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Meat Puppets 2 was huge for me.
Yes.
Um, and at that point, nobody had gotten anywhere yet.
Yeah.
It was just creativity and this weird community of messed up bands
But
traveling around the country in a van.
but let's go back a little bit to My War and the impact it had on Seattle. I mean, it's funny because I can't think of any other musical scenes anywhere else that were impacted by the slowing down of hardcore band, right? I mean, Seattle was
Yeah,
you guys seemed pretty, and I don't seem that in the derogatory way. I'm not being ironic, but you guys seemed pretty mature music fans at that point. Because to
mhm,
understand what Black Flag was doing, I mean, Henry Rollins spoke a lot about how people didn't give a shit about that album and people were complaining and saying, play faster, play faster. And this
yeah.
apparently didn't happen in Seattle.
No, it seemed like it was completely uh accepted and we loved it.
Yeah.
You know, it, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but bands were already kind of slowing down, getting groovier.
Hmm.
10-minute warning. We had the Human.
Yes.
It was a fairly diverse scene, and lots of other smaller bands too that were slowing down. And like Flipper was a big influence as well.
Okay.
We had a band Dismal that was
Hmm.
slowing down. It gets kind of being like there's a lot of scuzzy rock going
Yeah.
on. And the bands that came through that we liked the most were the Tales of Terror.
Yes.
I mean, they came out of the hardcore scene as well, but they weren't playing hardcore
Hmm.
anymore. They were doing something, I guess, kind of
Yes.
sleazy trash rock.
Hmm.
Uh, and that all those bands spoke to the Seattle crowd collectively more than just the super fast, hardcore. Uh, um, and I'm not, there's, Seattle had a really arty side of the scene too.
Okay.
A
Okay.
lot of post-punk bands that were
Yes.
happening there that were taking their cues from the UK post-punk scene,
Yeah.
like Public Image, Gang of Four, that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. We had Three Swimmers, Little Bears from Bangkok, all sorts of great, like arty, bass-heavy bands.
Yes.
And when Soundgarden started, they were kind of from that side of the fence,
Hmm.
where it like Hero's bass was kind of a big thing, and Kim's guitar was super affected,
Hmm.
like a lot of
John
effect pedals
John
going.
McKeoch of Keith Levine, that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was that kind of scene, and it wasn't hardcore. And then they kind of started slowing it down even more and getting more bass heavy, and yeah, I'm not. And then like all the arty bands kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
What was left was these bands that had been influenced by that stuff, the UK post-punk, but now they were getting heavier and dirtier.
And I have to ask you about Brazil, which figures prominently in your book. You mentioned a lot. You mentioned that first tour that we did in 2001 was the only
Yeah,
tour with Steve Dukic, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit
That was
about
that.
yeah.
Well, in America, we are not taught much about South America in general, except that it's all third world countries.
Yes. Yep.
And
And we
getting
speak
there is like,
Spanish. And we speak
yeah,
Spanish.
yeah, yeah. And getting down to Brazil, it was just such a shocking eye opener for me. I think for all of us, like this is nothing like we imagined. It's such a great country and so diverse. Every color of person is well represented in Brazil.
Yes.
And I mean, even realizing or learning about the Japanese influence in Brazil,
Yeah.
that I had no idea,
Yes.
you know. So I was embarrassed at how little I knew about Brazil when I went down there the first time, and loved it, loved the people, the music. I love that people who kept giving us CDs and burnt CDs of older Brazilian music.
Yes.
You know, some of the psychedelic stuff, you know, and that we didn't know anything about either.
Yeah.
And that was great. And it just seemed like such a history with so much culture and history, you know, that I was shocked, and I came home and signed up for Brazilian Portuguese classes.
Oh, you did? Cool.
I did.
Really? Yeah.
But I took like 3 lessons, and then I broke my rib skateboarding.
Okay, it was that time you broke your rib. Okay.
Yeah, and I missed 2 classes, and I went back, and I was like, okay, I'm completely lost now. It's a very difficult language to learn.
It is.
For English speakers.
It is.
And I gave up, and that was that. But
and how's your record collecting? You're still going, I guess, I mean, reading the book, it's such a nice, a beautiful part of your life too, the scavenging for old records and going to thrift record stores and that stuff. I mean, I guess it should be a little harder today, right? I mean, the offers less today, or yeah.
It's a very different world as far as records go. I love that the younger generations have, you know, discovered it, but you can't really go to thrift stores and find rarities anymore like
Yes.
I could when, you know, 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40
Sure.
years ago. I still love the hunt. It's just it's a more difficult hunt, and
Yeah.
the younger generations don't care about 7-inch records very much.
Yeah.
And that's still always what I've loved the most, because that's kind of like the literature of punk rock, if you will.
Yes.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
about getting out a 7-inch record in
Sure.
the early days. And so I still love, you know, hunting through the dollar bins of 7-inch records.
Very cool.
I spend a lot of time in Boise, Idaho now.
Oh, really?
My girlfriend lives there, and they have a great record store, and their dollar bins of 7-inch records like never fail to satisfy me.
That's amazing. So you
cool
went from Seattle to Portland, and now you're going a lot to Boise.
Yeah, I spend like about almost half my time in Boise at this
Really?
point. Yeah, and I'll be moving there at some point in this next year. You know,
Cool.
I'm almost a empty nester. My older son moved out,
Okay.
and my younger son has no plans to move to Boise with me, so he's working on it.
Now, look, I have to ask you about the tour. I mean, the shows in Brazil and South America. What are you guys preparing? I mean, the last album is really great. I guess you'll play several songs from that.
Yeah, you know, we try to, as the longer we're around, the more we have to kind of pick and choose what songs we can play live, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to play 3-hour sets.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll definitely do about, you know, at least 5 or 6 songs off the new record, and then hopefully, you know, enough of the classic older songs that people aren't disappointed.
No.
You know,
People
we'll never not play "Touch Me Up Sick," for example.
Yes.
And things like that. But you know, we try to mix it up a little bit, you know, show to show, and play a few different songs. We're playing tonight here in Portland, actually.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah. But with Jim Sangster on bass.
Because guys in Australia.
Guys in Australia. So
yeah.
like guys fine with us playing local-ish, you know, Northwest shows. Without him, you know, which is, you know, I mean, he understands, you know, he's in freaking Australia.
Yes.
He can't come home for like one show, but it's really fun to play with Jim.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an old friend, and he's in, you know, 2 bands with Dan up in Seattle at this point, the Tripwires and the No 3 band. So he's just part of the clan, you know, and it's pretty fun.
And how do you see Mudhoney audiences today? I mean, you guys play a lot in Europe still, and you tour the US a lot. Is it a mixed crowd, like a lot of younger kids too watching, or do you have like an older too?
Well, we have, you know, it's very diverse at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last European tour we did, you know, it's really cool when it's a parent and their kid at the show together.
Yes.
You know, I like that a lot.
Yes.
You know, I like that idea. Yeah, it seems like, you know, because we're part of the history, part of the fabric of you know, the rock and roll story. And you know, the kids that are really into, like, obviously they're going to discover, you know, Nirvana and get really into that. And they're going to keep seeing our name pop up, and they're doing their research online and listening to the things, I mean, the younger people, I mean, I have two kids that are really into music, and watching how they digest music is so different from the way I did.
Yes.
Neither of them cares about records whatsoever. It's all online, but it's song by song. You don't have to like commit to a whole album. You just find a song, you go, okay, that's a cool song. And like, what else is kind of like that, and like Milo, my younger guy, he does so much research.
Oh, really?
And when he gets into something, he'll tell me about it. Like, he got really into folk punk a couple years ago. I was throwing out some names, and Billy Bragg. He's like, "Oh yeah, of course." And I said Patrick Fitzgerald, who's a fairly obscure 1977 London punk poet guy that did a great song called "Safety Pin Stuck in My Heart" that I used to cover acoustically. And I mentioned that to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, I like that. I like that guy." I was like, "How do you even know that? Like, you're 18 years old." It's like it's available online, And so it's kind of a freer way of listening to music to me, the way the younger people do.
It's true.
Yeah.
We're taking our kids to see you guys. It'll be the first time. That'll be amazing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It'll be very cool. So look, Steve, always a pleasure talking to you, man. Can't wait for you guys to be here. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. We're really looking forward to it.
It's going to be really cool. Thank you very much, man. Congratulations on the book, and I'll see you in March.
All right, man. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, dude. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.